A woman walks up to Keanu Reeves, says nothing, and hands him a note. He's never known his father, and I think he should meet him. Standing beside her is a boy who looks just like Keanu did at 10. What Keanu discovers next will change 2 lives forever and break your heart. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The air inside the community library was soft with the scent of old books and fresh coffee. Keanu had just finished a quiet, heartfelt speech at a fundraiser for a children's literacy initiative. He wasn't there for publicity. No cameras, no stage lighting, just folding chairs, library shelves, and a few dozen people who cared deeply about giving kids a better future. He spoke from a low podium about the power of stories, about how reading gave him escape when the world felt too heavy, about how the right words at the right time could become a lifeline. When it ended, the applause was gentle but warm. A few people approached him for handshakes and thanks. A young volunteer asked him to sign a well-worn copy of Mice and Men, and he did so quietly, with a smile. But something pulled at him, a sense that the evening wasn't quite over. Near the back, standing just outside the exit, a woman waited. She held the hand of a boy who couldn't have been older than 10. Her coat was simple, her posture straight. She didn't move forward with the others. She waited, watching, like she had something to say but didn't know how to say it. When most of the crowd had cleared, Keanu walked toward the exit. She stepped into his path. "Hi," she said softly. "I know this is unusual." Before he could respond, she reached into her coat and handed him a folded note. Then she turned to the boy. "Come on, Eli," she said gently. The boy glanced back at Keanu. Just for a second, his dark eyes lingered. There was something in them, an old soul, curiosity, and something else that Keanu couldn't quite place. Then they were gone. Keanu stood by the door, the note in his hand, unmoving. He unfolded it slowly, his fingers trembling before he even realized it. The note was handwritten in careful script. "He's never known his father, and I think you should meet him." There was no signature, no explanation. Just that one line. Keanu looked back toward the street, but the woman and the boy had already disappeared into the night. Keanu sat in his car for almost 20 minutes before turning the ignition. He didn't drive anywhere specific, just let the streets guide him, headlights streaking against dark windows. His mind wasn't on the road, it was on the boy, the woman, and that note. He had received all kinds of strange messages before, fan letters, claims, requests. But this wasn't sensational. It was quiet, intimate. It felt real. The boy's face replayed in his mind again and again. His hair was dark, thick. His posture was slightly slouched, like he carried thoughts heavier than his age. And his eyes, those were the ones that stayed with Keanu. They weren't just familiar, they were haunting. They mirrored a look Keanu remembered seeing in the mirror as a child, standing in his room alone, wondering where his father had gone. He couldn't shake the resemblance. Not just physical, there was something in the energy, in the stillness. He parked near his home and sat staring at the note again. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, like the words had been written and rewritten in the writer's head before pen ever touched paper. "He's never known his father, and I think you should meet him." He whispered it out loud, testing how it sounded in the air. Keanu didn't have children. He had mentored, donated, helped schools, sponsored programs, encouraged thousands. But this wasn't general. This was pointed, personal. He leaned back in the seat, his heart pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. Then he opened his phone, navigated to the event's registration list, and scanned for anyone named Grace. Nothing jumped out. No surnames were listed. No contact details for attendees. It was a free community event. She could have come from anywhere. Still, he took a screenshot of the note and sent it to his assistant, Sophia. He added only 4 words. "Can you look into this?" He didn't sleep much that night. He kept seeing the boy's face, the way his eyes had widened just a bit before he turned away. There was a question in that look, and Keanu realized something that sent a chill through him. He had seen that exact same expression once, on the set of a film when he had nearly been thrown from a horse and a man had pulled him to safety. The stuntman had looked at him afterward with that same mix of relief, pride, and distance. That man's name was Landon Shaw, and Keanu hadn't seen him in over 10 years. The next morning, Keanu sat in his kitchen, coffee untouched, laptop open in front of him. The night's silence still clung to him, even in daylight. He replayed footage from the event. A few attendees had posted snippets on social media, clips of his speech, shots of the venue. In one video, shot near the exit, he saw her, Grace. She stood near the door, her coat slightly open, her hand resting on Eli's shoulder. Her eyes weren't on the camera. They were on Keanu as he shook hands with guests and made his way toward her. He paused the video at the moment she looked down at Eli, then back at him. The connection between them was quiet but unmistakable. The boy didn't fidget. He didn't glance around like most kids. He waited, patient, still. Keanu watched the video again, this time focusing on Eli's hands. They were clasped in front of him, thumbs rubbing together in a nervous rhythm, a rhythm Keanu recognized from his own childhood. The exact way he used to fidget when waiting for his mom to finish a conversation or when walking through unfamiliar rooms. Sophia called around mid-morning. "I'm looking into her," she said. "No guarantees yet." But that note? It wasn't casual. Keanu exhaled. "I know. Do you think he's yours?" she asked carefully. "I don't know," Keanu replied. "But I know I've seen that look before. In the mirror? Worse. In someone who vanished." He ended the call and looked down at the note again. He didn't know if the boy was his or if this was something else entirely, but he knew one thing for certain. That boy didn't need answers someday. He needed them now, and Keanu wasn't going to let another decade go by in silence. Keanu paced across the living room of his quiet home just before midnight, barefoot, the note still folded tightly in his hand. He hadn't been able to rest since returning from the event. There was something about the boy, Eli, that wouldn't let go of his thoughts. It wasn't just the way the kid had looked at him. It was the way it had felt, as though something invisible had shifted and part of the past had circled back to find him. He moved to his desk, opened his laptop, and clicked through bookmarked tabs until he reached a saved live stream archive from the charity event. The video wasn't great quality, someone had recorded it from their phone, but he wasn't looking for detail, he was looking for presence. He fast-forwarded to the end. There, in the last few minutes, the camera caught it. In the back of the room, just behind the final row of chairs, a boy stood beside a woman. No fidgeting, no slouching. He wasn't distracted. He was watching. Keanu leaned in. The boy's posture, quietly composed, arms loosely folded in front of him, a faint but thoughtful smile, struck something deep. He recognized that stillness, that kind of self-containment. It wasn't common in most 10-year-olds. It was the kind that came from watching too much, feeling too much, too early. He rewound the clip and played it again, watching only the boy. Every movement was subtle, deliberate. Even when people passed in front of him, Eli barely shifted. He stayed with his eyes fixed on the front, almost as if he were searching for something. Keanu exhaled, the image lingering long after the screen dimmed. It wasn't just the face. It was the energy. The way Eli held himself in the noise of the world. Calm, thoughtful, distant. Just like Keanu had as a boy. Just like Landon had the last time they spoke on set. He opened his phone and stared at the note again. He's never known his father, and I think you should meet him. Who leaves a message like that with no follow-up? Who hands over the possibility of something so life-changing, then disappears into the night? Someone who's thought about it for a long, long time. Keanu stood, walked back to the kitchen, poured water he didn't drink. The silence was loud now. There was no escaping the feeling. Something about that boy belonged to him. Whether it was blood or something deeper, he didn't know. But either way, he wasn't going to ignore it. The next morning, Keanu sat across from Sophia in his home office, the folded note laid flat between them on the table. He had called her early, asking if she could come over instead of meeting virtually. He wanted this conversation in person. She arrived with her laptop in one hand and an espresso in the other, already dressed in her signature dark blazer and jeans. Sophia had worked with Keanu for over 15 years. She wasn't just his assistant. She was the person who kept his world from unraveling when it threatened to. She picked up the note and read it silently. Then she looked at him. "She didn't sign it," Sophia said. "No," Keanu replied. "She didn't have to." He pulled up the footage again and showed her the final frame, the one with Grace and Eli standing near the exit. Sophia narrowed her eyes and tilted her head. "That's the boy?" Keanu nodded. "Wow," she whispered. She zoomed in and studied the boy's expression. "It's more than just resemblance, isn't it?" Keanu leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, it's something else. I don't know how to explain it. It's like I've seen him before." "You think he's yours?" Keanu hesitated. "I don't know. I've replayed everything. That film set, that town, the people I met, the timing, and all I can think about is Landon." Sophia looked up sharply. "Landon Shaw? The stunt guy?" "Yeah, the one who saved me. The one who vanished," she said softly. Keanu nodded. Grace was a nurse on that same set. Eli's age would line up with the months after it wrapped. Sophia sat back, processing. "So, you think Landon and Grace?" "I don't know for sure," Keanu said. "But if I had to guess, Eli's not my son. He's Landon's." Sophia looked back at the boy's image. "But you see yourself in him." Keanu stared at the screen. "Yeah," he said, "because Landon saved my life, and now his son shows up in mine." Sophia nodded slowly. "That's not something you walk away from." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophia spoke again. "What do you want to do?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked at the boy on the screen again. "I want to help him," he said finally, "even if he never knows why." "From a distance?" "At first," he said, "until I understand more, until I'm sure I won't hurt anyone." Sophia nodded. "Then we'll find out who Grace is, and where she came from." Keanu exhaled. "Thank you." Sophia smiled faintly. "You don't need to thank me. You're doing what most people wouldn't." He looked down at the boy's face again, and for the first time, he felt something shift inside him. Not fear, but responsibility. Keanu spent the rest of the afternoon going through his journals from the time he worked on that film in New Mexico. Most of the entries were short, fragments written during late nights on location, filled with passing observations and notes on his character. But there was one entry, dated nearly 11 years ago, that caught his eye. It read, "Horse nearly crushed me today. Shaw pulled me clear. Split-second move. Said nothing afterward. Just walked away and lit a cigarette. I told him I owed him one. He just shrugged. Said, 'We all take turns.'" Keanu read the line again, "We all take turns." That stuck with him now more than ever. He remembered how Landon always stood just outside the circle, always alert, always ready to step in, but never asking for thanks. He had the presence of someone who had already lived 2 lifetimes and didn't expect a third. It made sense now, the distance, the silence after the film, the rumors of addiction, then nothing. But if Landon really was Eli's father, and Eli had shown up with a note in hand, then maybe Landon hadn't been gone all this time. Maybe he had just disappeared in the way people do when they think they've failed. Keanu closed the journal and looked at the note again. "He's never known his father, and I think you should meet him." It wasn't a claim. It was a request. From one part of the past asking another, not to vanish again. Later that evening, Keanu walked into his study, turned on the dim lamp near the bookshelves, and lit a candle. The scent of sandalwood filled the air. He didn't usually pray, But tonight he sat in silence with his hands folded, the note resting in front of him. He thought of the boy's eyes, of the stuntman's courage, of the woman who stood quietly, saying nothing but leaving everything in a single line. And he whispered 3 words into the stillness. "I won't run." He didn't know yet what that promise would mean, but he knew the next step was his to take. Keanu didn't make any phone calls that week. He didn't reach out to Grace. He didn't go back to the community center. But he didn't forget either. He simply moved forward the only way he knew how, through action. Sophia helped him set up a sponsorship through one of the foundations he had quietly supported for years. It was an educational assistance program for underserved children, the kind that operated in quiet, confidential partnership with schools and families. Grace was contacted discreetly. No names were given. Just an offer to support Eli's schooling, no strings attached. Grace hesitated at first, but after 2 conversations with the foundation's local rep, she accepted. Tuition at a nearby private school was fully covered. School supplies were delivered to their home. Even transportation was arranged through a prepaid rideshare account designed to feel safe and anonymous. Keanu stayed completely in the background. He didn't want to overwhelm the boy. He didn't want to intrude on Grace's life. All he knew was that something about Eli pulled at him, and helping him, without being seen, felt like the safest way to start. But he didn't stop there. Every Friday, a box would arrive at Eli's door. Inside were carefully selected books, fiction, science, poetry, and sometimes comics. Each box came with a short note typed on plain paper. "Hope these spark something good. Keep reading, you never know where it'll take you." No signature, just a gentle nudge forward. And then came the music. Through the foundation, Keanu arranged for Eli to be offered free piano lessons at a local music center. It wasn't mandatory, just an opportunity. Grace asked Eli if he wanted to try. He said yes. That simple yes sent a ripple through Keanu's life. He thought of his own piano at home, the quiet afternoons he used to spend improvising chords, letting sound speak where words couldn't. He wondered if Eli would feel that same sense of calm when his fingers touched the keys. Keanu kept his distance, but he checked in often, through Sophia, through anonymous updates from the foundation. Each time he heard that Eli had read another book, or finished a song, or made a new friend, he felt something strange. Pride, maybe, or hope, or the ache of something that almost was. He wasn't Eli's father, but he was something now, something he couldn't yet define. 2 months into the sponsorship, Sophia forwarded Keanu a message from the foundation. It was a scanned image of a handwritten letter from Eli. "Dear book friend, thank you for the stories. I read the one about the boy in the forest 3 times. I like that he didn't talk much, but he still made friends. I think I'm like him. My mom said I could take piano lessons, and I like that too. Maybe one day I'll play for you. From Eli." Keanu stared at the note. No punctuation, slanted writing, carefully spaced lines. But it wasn't the penmanship that stayed with him. It was the line, "I think I'm like him." Keanu read it again and again. He printed the letter and pinned it on the corkboard above his writing desk. Then he opened a notebook. The first page, blank for months, suddenly had a reason to be filled. He started writing about Eli. Not fiction, not memories, but impressions, observations, feelings. He wrote about the way the boy looked at the world in that short clip, the way his hands folded when he was thinking, the way his silence said more than most people's words. Keanu wasn't sure what he was building in those pages. Maybe it was just a way to understand his own reaction. Maybe it was a way to prepare for something bigger. But he kept writing. Every day. He recorded each letter Eli sent, each update from the foundation, each book the boy finished. And one sentence stayed etched in his mind. "Maybe one day I'll play for you." He imagined it. The sound of hesitant notes turning into music. The shy glance toward a man he didn't know was watching. And he realized how dangerous distance could be. It protected, but it also hurt. Because some part of him didn't want to just support Eli from afar. Some part of him wanted to sit beside the boy and say, "I know what it's like to carry questions." But that wasn't his place. Not yet. So he turned back to the journal and wrote the words he couldn't say out loud. "You're not alone. And I see you, even if you don't see me." Spring came, and with it another update from the foundation. Eli had completed a personal reading challenge ahead of schedule. He had asked for more advanced material, more nonfiction, more books about machines, travel, and space. He was curious, sharp, and persistent. The music teacher also sent feedback. Eli was quiet at first, but his timing was precise. He didn't rush. He didn't force things. He listened. And when he made mistakes, he didn't panic. He just started over. Keanu smiled at that line. He wrote it down in the journal. He listens. And when he messes up, he starts again. There was so much to admire in that. So much of Landon in that. Keanu wondered if Eli had any idea what kind of legacy was quietly growing inside him. One afternoon, Sophia stopped by with another envelope. A new letter from Eli. This one was shorter. "Dear book friend, I don't know who you are, but my teacher says sometimes heroes don't wear capes. She says they show up in different ways. I think you're like me, quiet but thinking a lot. I want to meet you someday. Is that okay? From Eli." Keanu folded the paper and held it in his hands for a long time. The words hit deeper than he expected. "I want to meet you someday. Is that okay?" He didn't know how to answer. Not yet. But that night he sat at his piano and played for the first time in weeks. Slow chords, gentle melodies, nothing written, just feeling. The journal sat open beside him. A new page. He wrote, "I want to meet you too, but not because of guilt, not because of answers, because something in me recognizes something in you, and I'm trying to become someone worthy of that." Then he closed the book, lit a candle, and let the notes from the piano fill the house. Outside, the world was quiet, but inside, something had begun. Not just mentorship, not just charity, a thread, a bond, a story that wasn't his to finish, but one he would do everything he could to protect. Sophia arrived at Keanu's house early one morning with a brown folder in hand and a look that told him what he already felt in his gut. This story ran deeper than coincidence. They sat in the kitchen, sunlight barely breaking through the tall windows. Keanu poured coffee but didn't drink it. His eyes were fixed on the folder. "I didn't go through back channels," Sophia said gently. "Just what was publicly available, and even that was enough to paint a picture." She slid the folder across the table. Keanu opened it slowly. Inside were several printed pages, public records, work logs, and social media captures, and at the top, a photo of Grace. It was a staff badge from a film production dated 11 years earlier. New Mexico. Keanu's breath caught. He remembered the movie, the dust, the heat, the long days on horseback, a western with deep dialogue and hard stunts. And he remembered the accident, the moment a horse bucked too early and his foot slipped, and a man named Landon Shaw grabbed his vest and pulled him back before hooves met ribs. Grace was listed as the on-site medic. She worked for the medical contractor, Sophia explained. No big credit, no film premiere, just a few weeks in the desert. But she stayed in town after the shoot. Her rental lease started 1 month after the film wrapped. Keanu flipped to the next page. A birth certificate. No father listed. Just Eli's name. And Grace as the mother. She hadn't married, hadn't changed towns. She'd remained quietly in New Mexico, raising her son in a small house near the edge of the city. Keanu sat back in his chair, the weight of it all settling around him like dust on a film set. "She stayed behind," he murmured. Sophia nodded. "She could have left, but she didn't. That says something." He stared at the photo of her again. The same calm strength he remembered seeing that night at the literacy event. The way she stood tall but never pressed herself forward. The way she looked at Eli like she was carrying the entire world in her chest. Keanu ran his fingers along the edge of the birth certificate. She didn't put Landon's name down. She didn't put anyone's. That made him pause. He wasn't sure what that meant. Protection? Disappointment? Or just exhaustion from hoping for someone who never came back. Either way, it was clear. This wasn't just a mother trying to push a child into someone else's life. This was a woman who had done everything she could alone. And now, for reasons only she knew, had decided it was time someone else saw the boy she'd raised. Keanu closed the folder and walked to the bookshelf in his study. He ran his fingers across the spines until he found an old leather-bound notebook tucked behind a row of film scripts. It was one of his personal journals from that New Mexico shoot. He sat at the edge of the couch and opened it, flipping through the pages quickly until a note caught his eye. Grace, medic, quiet, checked my wrist after fall, kind eyes. Didn't say much. Another entry, days later. Saw Grace at lunch, talking to Shaw. He actually smiled. First time I've seen that. He turned the page. Night wrap. Shaw stayed late. Grace, too. They looked like they knew something the rest of us didn't. Keanu stopped there. The entries were short, clipped, but they held enough. He remembered now. Grace was always nearby. Never loud, never drawing attention. She kept to herself, working long hours focused on the actors, stuntmen, and crew. She was the one who handed him water after long takes, checked for bruises, made sure the first aid kits were stocked. And Landon. He had been magnetic but troubled, brilliant on camera, daring in the field. But there was a shadow in him, even then. Keanu remembered one night near the end of filming. The cast and crew had gathered around a bonfire. There was laughter, drinks, stories. Grace had sat beside Landon, not close, not affectionate, just comfortable. They didn't need to talk much. Keanu had noticed that back then, but never thought much of it. Now, it felt like a missing piece snapping into place. He looked at the certificate again. Eli's birth was recorded less than 10 months after the shoot ended. He stared at the timeline. Everything fit, and Grace hadn't asked for anything in return. Not then, not now. Just a folded note. He's never known his father, and I think you should meet him. Keanu stood and walked back to the kitchen where Sophia was still seated. She didn't want money, he said softly. No, Sophia replied. She wanted you to see him. Keanu leaned against the counter, lost in thought. He stayed behind and raised him alone. She did, Sophia said, and the boy you saw, he's grounded, intelligent. That kind of stability doesn't come from chance. Keanu thought of Eli's letters, the way he thanked his anonymous sponsor, the way he said he wanted to play piano, the way he ended his last note. I think you're like me. He looked at Sophia again. If Landon really was his father, then this is more than resemblance. Keanu nodded slowly. This is inheritance. That afternoon, Keanu pulled up old call sheets from the film production. He found Landon Shaw listed under stunt coordination. He had performed some of the most dangerous sequences in the movie: horse rears, weapon choreography, fire scenes. There was a short blurb on his resume that Sophia located on an archived casting site. Former military, precision work, no family listed. Keanu sat at his desk, turning that phrase over in his mind. No family listed. It sounded like a decision, not a fact. Sophia leaned against the doorway. If she stayed behind and he vanished, then maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he did, she said gently, and thought he couldn't be part of it. Keanu nodded slowly. Addiction? Possibly. There were whispers. After the shoot, he disappeared. No social accounts, no union renewals, just gone. Keanu stared down at the table. And now Eli's growing up not knowing who saved his life. Sophia stepped closer. Might not even know he has something to forgive. Keanu exhaled. We need to find him. Landon? Keanu nodded. Even if he's not ready, even if he's fallen apart, he deserves to know what he created, who he left behind. Sophia sat beside him. And what about Eli? Keanu looked out the window, the sky dimming just slightly into early evening. I'm not trying to replace anyone, he said. But if this boy is carrying someone I owe my life to, then I want him to know that part of his story matters, that his father didn't just vanish. He paused. That he made a choice once, to save someone, even if he couldn't save himself after. Sophia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Keanu stood slowly, pressing his hand against the desk. We find Landon Shaw, and if he doesn't want to be found, then we give Eli the truth, Keanu said, and maybe the kind of father figure Landon would have wanted for him. Sophia nodded once. I'll start with medical rehab databases, veterans programs, small-town records near where he was last seen. Keanu picked up the note again. He's never known his father. The boy didn't know. But now Keanu did. And that meant he had a responsibility, not just to help, but to remember, and to carry forward the kind of bravery that had once saved his life, even if it was now buried under silence, shadows, and time. The memory wasn't sharp. It came back in flashes, dust in the air, the thick smell of sweat and leather, the sound of hooves slamming into the dry earth. One moment, Keanu was riding hard for a take. The next, the saddle slipped. His left foot lost its grip, and the horse lurched sideways, spooked by something unseen. He was thrown forward, the reins ripping from his hands, the ground rising fast. He remembered the panic in his chest, the sharp scream from someone offset. And then, nothing, except the feel of a strong arm around his chest yanking him sideways, seconds before the horse reared and slammed down where he would have been. When Keanu rolled over and gasped for breath, Landon Shaw was crouched beside him, hands already waving for the med team, face covered in dirt, but eyes razor sharp. He didn't say much that day, just nodded once when Keanu thanked him, then walked away like it had been nothing. But it wasn't nothing. That moment stayed with Keanu for years. It could have ended his career, or worse, his life. And Landon had stepped in without hesitation. Later that evening, Keanu had tried to offer him a drink, even cash. Landon declined both, said he wasn't drinking, said he didn't need thanks. We all take turns, he muttered. Keanu had remembered that line, written it in his journal, even used it once in an interview when asked about heroism. But he hadn't seen Landon after that rap party. No forwarding address, no stunt credits in later films, just gone. Now, that name echoed in his house like a ghost who had waited for the right moment to be remembered. Keanu stood in front of the mirror in his study and stared at his own reflection, trying to summon the full memory of Landon's face. It was weathered, strong jaw, buzzed hair, sharp eyes but soft with certain people, Grace being one of them. He remembered how Landon had lingered near her during lunch breaks, never close enough to seem romantic, just protective. And now, over a decade later, there was Eli. The timing matched, the silence made sense. The resemblance to both Keanu and Landon was uncanny. And Grace, she had waited this long to say something. Not because she was afraid, but maybe because she wasn't sure if Landon even knew. Or worse, maybe he knew and had walked away. Either way, Keanu needed to find out. Over the next 2 days, Sophia dug through everything she could find on Landon Shaw. Most of it wasn't helpful. Outdated crew listings, broken website links, and an inactive social media account that hadn't been touched in over 9 years. The stunt community remembered him, though, quietly. One forum post read, "Shaw was fearless, took the hits nobody wanted. Heard he had some demons, though." Another said, "He vanished after the New Mexico shoot. Shame, guy had talent, but I heard he got into trouble with debt." Keanu sat at the edge of the table as Sophia relayed the findings. No arrests. No official record, she said, but a few mentions of bounced checks, defaulted bills, rehab attempts. Keanu rubbed his temples. Someone like that doesn't just vanish, especially not if he had a kid on the way. Unless he didn't know, Sophia said, or couldn't handle knowing. Keanu didn't respond right away. He remembered a moment late one night during filming when he and Landon had shared a quiet drink of tea. Landon insisted on peppermint. He'd said alcohol wasn't his thing anymore. He'd made it 5 years sober, and he was trying to keep going. But he had looked tired, worn. There was something about Landon that always felt like he was carrying weight no one else could see. Maybe Grace had seen it too. And maybe she knew that if she told him about the pregnancy, he'd try to be something he wasn't ready to be, or worse, he'd fall apart trying. Keanu looked at the photos again, Grace's work badge, the birth certificate, the film set images, and tried to draw a line between then and now. "Do you think he's alive?" he asked. "I do," Sophia replied. "If he had passed, there'd be some record of it. I think he's just off the grid." Keanu stood and walked to the window. The city moved slowly beneath him. Cars, people, all unaware of the question that now weighed on him, heavier than anything he'd carried in years. "I want to find him." Sophia nodded. "I figured. Not for closure," Keanu added. "For truth. For Eli. Even if it's painful. Especially if it is." He paused, then said something he hadn't voiced before. "I owe him more than just my life. I owe him a chance to be seen." Sophia closed her laptop gently. "Then we find him." Keanu returned to New Mexico 2 days later. No cameras, no press, just him and a backpack. He rented a small car and drove past the old film set, now abandoned. The landscape was just as dry and unforgiving as he remembered. The hills looked the same, the wind still whispered through the canyon walls. But the people were gone. The trailers, the extras, the crew. It had all evaporated, leaving only memory and dust. He pulled into the nearest town and checked into a quiet inn. Then he visited the diner where they used to eat between shoots. The same woman still ran the place, older now but sharp-eyed. He asked about Grace. She remembered her. "Nice girl," she said. Stayed a while after the shoot, worked part-time at the urgent care clinic, kept to herself mostly. "And Landon?" Keanu asked carefully. She looked down, then out the window. "Haven't heard that name in a long time. He was in bad shape the last I heard. Someone said he left town and went south. Arizona maybe, trying to get clean." Keanu nodded, thanking her. Later that evening, Sophia called with a lead. A small rehab facility outside Santa Fe. One of the intake nurses recognized his name from an old application. No photo, but the age matches. He listed no emergency contact. Keanu's voice was steady. "Is he still there?" "He's still registered. And from what they said, he's not doing well." Keanu stood by the window, looking out at the sunset bleeding into the dry horizon. That part of the world had once been the site of a narrow escape. A man had saved his life and disappeared. Now, maybe, that man was fading out quietly, alone and unrecognized. And a boy who looked like both of them was waiting, without knowing what he was waiting for. Keanu made a choice. And going to see him? Sophia didn't ask why. She just said, "I'll send you the address." As the call ended, Keanu packed his things and sat quietly for a moment. In the journal he had started for Eli, he scribbled a single line. "Sometimes the people who save us forget how to save themselves." He closed the book and exhaled. Tomorrow he would find Landon Shaw, not to fix the past, but to remind it that it still mattered. Keanu sat with Sophia the evening before he was set to visit the rehab center outside Santa Fe. They were both quiet, the weight of the coming day heavy between them. Sophia had her laptop open, scanning through messages and notes, but her eyes kept drifting toward Keanu. "I've been thinking," she said finally. "Before you go, what if we ask the world for help?" Keanu glanced up. "You mean publicly?" "No names," Sophia replied. "But a story, something real, about Landon, about what he did. Someone out there might know more. And even if they don't, maybe they need to hear it." Keanu thought for a moment, then nodded. Let's do it. Together they crafted a short post. It didn't mention Landon's name. It didn't mention Keanu's either. It simply told the truth. There was a man once, a stuntman. He pulled someone out of danger during a film shoot, then vanished. No fanfare, no recognition, just a quiet exit. Years later, the one he saved has never forgotten. The post ended with a single question. Has someone ever changed your life without even realizing it? Tell us who they were below. Sophia posted it to the Foundation's page, along with a stock image of two hands gripping in mid-air, one catching the other. Within an hour, it had 100 likes, then 1,000. By the next morning, it had gone viral. The comments flooded in. A man from Georgia wrote, "My fifth-grade teacher stayed after school every day with me when I couldn't read aloud. She never made me feel stupid. I never thanked her, but I became a writer because of her." A nurse from Detroit shared, "I once fainted in the subway. A stranger caught me before I hit the ground, stayed with me until help came, then disappeared. I never even learned his name." Another person posted, "My neighbor used to bring extra groceries to my mom when my dad left. We were kids. We thought she just liked sharing. I realize now she probably saved our lives more than once." The thread grew longer by the hour. People from around the world joined in. Stories about coaches, janitors, childhood friends, bus drivers, librarians. Each one about someone who gave something invisible but vital. Kindness, time, hope. Keanu sat in silence as Sophia read them aloud. "You see what this did?" she said. "You lit something." He nodded. It wasn't about him. It never was. It was about all the people who gave, then disappeared, who left ripples behind, unaware of how far they would travel. As the post neared 100,000 shares, one comment stopped Sophia mid-scroll. Her eyes locked on the screen. "Keanu." He looked up. She read aloud. "I knew Landon Shaw. He was better than people gave him credit for." Keanu leaned forward. Sophia clicked into the comment. The profile belonged to someone named Jamie Ortega. No profile photo. Just a simple banner that read, "Desert never forgets the wind." Sophia messaged the account privately. Within minutes, a reply came back. "Yes, I knew him. He stayed with us for a while in Taos after the film wrapped. He was trying to get clean. My brother was in the program too. Landon was quiet, but kind. Wrote letters at night. He kept saying, 'I just need to be better for someone.'" Sophia looked up. He knew. Keanu's throat tightened. "Grace? Or maybe Eli," she said. "Or both." They continued reading. "He left one day without warning. Said he had to disappear before he messed anything up. I never heard from him again. But I've never forgotten him." Keanu sat back in his chair. That one sentence landed hard. He had to disappear before he messed anything up. He understood that kind of thinking, the logic of a wounded mind convincing itself that absence was kindness. But it wasn't. It was pain. And now a boy named Eli was growing up, not knowing the man who had once promised himself he would be better. Sophia stared at the screen. "This changes things." "It confirms things," Keanu replied. "He loved them. In his own way. And he ran not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much." They messaged Jamie back, asking if she knew where Landon might have gone next. She wasn't sure, but she remembered something. He had a photo he kept in his wallet, a woman holding a baby. He used to look at it before bed, every night. Keanu closed his eyes. It was real, every part of it. The boy, the woman, the stuntman who vanished. And now, finally, the pieces were coming together. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light through the windows, Keanu turned to Sophia. "People need to know that these quiet lives matter." "I do now," she said softly. Keanu opened his journal and wrote another line. "Sometimes the ones who leave don't mean to disappear. They just don't know how to stay." and tomorrow he would find the man who once pulled him out of danger, not to return the favor, but to remind him that he never stopped mattering, even when the world forgot. The days that followed the viral post blurred into a rhythm of waiting and searching. Sophia handled the online leads. Keanu brought in Malik, an old friend and trusted confidant who had worked with him on other private matters, someone who understood discretion and urgency. Together, they chased every thread that mentioned Landon Shaw. Malik called former union contacts. Sophia combed through rehab directories, veterans programs, and alternative care networks. A few leads came up cold. Wrong city, wrong age, wrong man. But one call changed the tone of everything. A rehab center just outside Santa Fe confirmed it. Landon Shaw was there. The intake director didn't give details over the phone, but said that if Keanu came in person, he could speak with the staff and possibly arrange a visit. The facility was small, private, nestled in the hills beyond the town line. It wasn't the kind of place built for headlines. It was built for recovery, or at least for dignity in the trying. Keanu thanked the staff member, hung up, and sat quietly for a long time. When he stood, he packed a single bag. He placed one thing carefully inside: Eli's most recent letter, folded beside a printed photo of the boy playing piano, back turned, the light catching the side of his face. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew who he was walking toward. The air grew thinner as the road climbed. Keanu drove slowly, winding through the high desert where the land stretched in all directions like a canvas no one had finished painting. Sagebrush, dry pines, and distant mesas blurred past the windows. Malik sat beside him in silence, sensing the tension in every mile. When they reached the rehab center, the sun was just cresting noon. The building was modest. Pale adobe walls, a gravel driveway, wind chimes on the porch. Nothing about it felt like an institution. It felt like a quiet place, built for final reckonings. Inside, the director greeted them with warm eyes and a clipboard. Her name was Elaine. She had worked there for 20 years and said little without meaning. She confirmed that Landon was in residence. "He's been here 6 months," she said. "Been clean the whole time. Works in the garden when he can, keeps to himself." "Is he sick?" Keanu asked. She nodded gently. "He has liver failure. He knows it's terminal, but he's not giving up." Keanu looked down. "Does he know anyone came for him?" Elaine shook her head. "Not yet. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure you'd come." Malik waited at the front as Elaine led Keanu down a simple hallway. The rooms were spaced out, each with a number and a small wooden plaque beside the door. At the end of the hall, Elaine paused. "Hell journals," she said softly. "Every morning, every night. And he talks to himself when he thinks no one's listening." Keanu nodded. "Do you want me to go in with you?" "No," he said. "Thank you." She stepped back, leaving him in front of the door. Keanu took a breath, reached into his coat pocket, and touched the corner of the photo. Then he knocked. Once. A voice on the other side answered, tired but clear. "Yeah?" Keanu opened the door. The room was sparse: a bed, a small writing desk, a chair near the window. The light poured in gently, painting everything in soft tones. Landon sat in the chair, wearing a faded sweatshirt and flannel pants. His frame had thinned, his skin paler than Keanu remembered, but his eyes, they were the same, sharp, watchful. He blinked as Keanu stepped in. "No way," he said after a long pause. "I'm either dreaming or dying faster than they told me." Keanu gave a faint smile. "You're not dreaming." Landon stared at him, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "What are you doing here?" Keanu stepped forward slowly. "I came to thank you, and to tell you something." Landon looked away, half laughing under his breath. "Takes over a decade for a thank you, huh? It's not just about what happened back then." Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out the photo. He handed it over. Landon took it with shaky hands, eyes narrowing as he studied the boy in the image. The air shifted. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Then he whispered, "Eli." Keanu said nothing, just watched. Landon closed his eyes, the photo still in his hands. "She told me once. Grace. But I was already halfway gone. Told her the kid deserved more than someone like me." "Hope doesn't know who you are," Keanu said softly. Landon opened his eyes again. "I figured. But he might someday." Landon looked down at the photo again. "Does he look like me?" "It looks like both of you." Landon let out a long breath. "I've wanted to fix things for so long, but I never knew how to come back." Keanu nodded. "I think you still can." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Landon looked up. "Why you? Why now?" Keanu looked him in the eyes. "Because I saw him, and I saw you in him, and because you once saved me without expecting anything in return." Landon swallowed hard. "I never forgot that day." "Neither did I." Landon clutched the photo closer to his chest. "Is he okay?" "He's more than okay. He's bright, thoughtful, musical." Landon let out a quiet laugh. "She used to hum to him at night. Said he kicked in rhythm before he was even born." Keanu leaned forward. "He deserves to know that, even if you can't be there in the way you wish you could." Landon nodded slowly. "Then help me do that." Keanu gave him a quiet, firm look. "I will." And in that small room, two men sat with the weight of years between them. But something new had begun. A bridge. A chance. The beginning of a promise kept. Landon stared at the photo for a long time, the silence between him and Keanu broken only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. His hand trembled as he held the picture of Eli. There was no doubt in his face. He knew who the boy was the moment he saw him. But instead of letting it show, Landon leaned back in his chair and forced a half smile. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Kid's got my ears. Poor guy." Keanu didn't laugh. He saw right through it. Landon shifted uncomfortably and held the picture like it might burn through his fingers. "You came all this way for this?" he asked, trying to sound amused. "I came all this way for you," Keanu said calmly. "And for him." Landon rolled his eyes and let out a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "You know, the last time someone knocked on my door with a photo, it was a repo guy." Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not here to collect anything. I'm here to give something back." Landon looked at him again, but this time there was less sarcasm in his eyes. He was still trying to build a wall, but the cracks were showing. "You didn't have to do this, Reeves," he said, voice quieter now. "I mean, you could have kept walking, ignored the note, acted like you never saw him." "I couldn't," Keanu replied, "because once I did, I couldn't unsee it." Landon dropped his gaze back to the photo. "That's my son," he whispered. "I thought maybe I'd never get to say that out loud." Keanu sat down across from him. "You just did." Landon wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his sweatshirt and tried to straighten up. "It's weird, you know. I spent so long trying not to mess him up, I figured leaving was the only good thing I could do." "Why?" Keanu asked gently. "Because I was a disaster," Landon said. "Drinking, broke, no plan. And she, Grace, she deserved more. He did too." "You could have stayed," Keanu said. Landon shook his head. "You don't understand. If I'd stayed, I would have dragged them down with me." Keanu leaned forward. "But you could have climbed with them." Landon let out a broken laugh. "Yeah, maybe. But I didn't know how. I still don't." Keanu looked him in the eye. "You don't have to know how, you just have to show up." Landon leaned back, rubbing his forehead like the truth had given him a headache. He looked thinner than before, worn down by years of bad choices and even harder recovery. But something in his voice changed. Less bitter, more exposed. "Grace told me she was pregnant," he said. "I remember that day like it's etched in my ribs. I just lost my place. I was crashing at a buddy's shop. Still clean then, barely. I told her I'd try, I even meant it." "What happened?" Keanu asked. "I failed," Landon said. "First paycheck I got, I used. Told myself I'd only take the edge off, but it turned into a week, then 2. I didn't call. I couldn't stand her hearing that version of me. I thought I'd call after I got straight again, but by then, I'd convinced myself they were better without me. Keanu said nothing. He didn't need to. Landon wasn't looking for judgment. I used to stare at this photo of them I kept folded in my wallet, Landon continued. Her holding Eli, just a baby, and I'd say to myself, just one more week of getting clean, and then I'll go back. But the weeks stacked, and shame is a hell of a jail cell. It is, Keanu said softly. Landon looked out the window, his jaw tense. You know what I regret most? Not just missing his first steps, or his first words. It's the story he must have told himself when I didn't show up. Keanu nodded slowly. He hasn't told himself any story yet. He doesn't know you. Landon blinked hard. That almost makes it worse. It doesn't have to stay that way, Keanu said. Landon turned back toward him. But what can I give him now? I'm dying. What do I do? Show up and vanish again? Keanu leaned in. You don't have to give him your future. You can give him the truth. Landon gripped the photo again, tighter this time. And if he hates me for it? Keanu met his eyes. And doesn't know who you were, but he could know who you are. That sentence held for a moment. Then Landon whispered, Do you think that's enough? It's more than most people get. Landon sat in silence for a long time after that, the photo in his lap, his eyes fixed on a world only he could see. Then he said, I want to write him something. I don't know if I can say it, but I think I could write it. Keanu nodded. Start there. The next morning, Keanu returned to the center. Landon was already at the window, a notebook open, pen in hand. He looked up with clearer eyes. I didn't sleep much, he said, but I remembered things. Good things? Keanu asked. Landon nodded. Small things. Like how Grace used to hum this old jazz song when she was nervous. How Eli kicked at night when I'd talk to him through her stomach. I never told anyone that. You can tell him, Keanu said. In your words. Landon looked down at the page. I've started. I'm calling it Things I Wish You Knew. Keanu sat down beside him, watching as Landon slowly filled another page. His handwriting was shaky but deliberate. Each word, a piece of him, laid down in ink. He deserves to know I tried, Landon said. Even if I didn't succeed. He'll see that, Keanu said. Because you're still trying. Landon looked up, the weight behind his eyes less dark now. What if I don't finish this? What if time runs out? Keanu placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Then I'll finish it with you. I'll carry it. Landon's voice cracked. Why would you do that? Because you saved me once. And because he's your son. Landon nodded, wiping his face. Then let's give him a story that tells the whole truth, not just the silence. They sat for a while, no more words needed. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. And inside, a father, once lost in his own regret, began to return. Not in perfection, but in presence. Landon's hands moved slowly as he flipped through the pages of the worn notebook in his lap. The cover was creased, corners bent from use. It had no title, no design, just a plain black journal filled with the handwriting of a man who had kept too much inside for too long. Keanu sat in the chair beside him again, this time without questions. Landon had asked him to come back the next day. He said there was something he needed to say before the time got away from them again. I've accepted it, Landon said softly. The doctors didn't lie. I know I'm not getting better. Liver's done. They're just keeping me comfortable now. Keanu nodded, his gaze steady. You don't have to pretend with me. Landon gave a tired smile. Good, because pretending takes energy I don't have anymore. He held up the notebook. This is what I have left. Keanu looked at it. Landon ran his thumb down the edge of the pages. I started writing to him before he was even born. I'd write after Grace fell asleep, sitting on the porch, stuff I never got to say. Then, after I left, I kept going. Most of it's probably messy, selfish, but some of it's real. Keanu leaned in. That's all that matters. Landon stared at the book a moment longer, then placed it in Keanu's hands. I need you to give this to him someday, he said. When he's old enough, when he asks. Keanu held the notebook gently. It was heavier than it looked. Landon's voice was thin now. He's going to want to know why I left, why I didn't show up. I can't rewrite what happened. But I want him to hear it from me, not the silence. Will, Keanu said quietly. Landon looked over at him. I'm not asking you to lie, just don't let him forget who I tried to be. Keanu closed his fingers over the notebook. I won't. The sun dipped low over the desert hills as the hours passed. Neither man looked at the clock. They talked about the past, the way the wind sometimes felt familiar, like an echo from a childhood memory. They spoke about motorcycles, about film sets, about the kind of quiet Grace always carried, even when the world around her was too loud. Landon grew slower as the night wore on. His voice rasped more often, his hands resting in his lap. But his mind was sharp. She deserved better, he murmured. Grace. She carried both of us without complaint. I saw it in her eyes, even when I failed. She never hated me, just hurt. She never stopped hoping, Keanu said. Landon nodded. That's the worst kind of love, isn't it? The kind that stays even when it shouldn't. No, Keanu replied. That's the kind of love that saves people. Landon smiled faintly. Maybe. I wish I'd known that earlier. They fell into silence for a while. Then Landon asked, Do you think he'll forgive me? Keanu didn't answer right away. He leaned back in the chair, looking toward the ceiling, as if searching for the right words. I think he'll ask questions first, then he'll grieve, then maybe he'll begin to understand. Landon exhaled slowly. That's all I can hope for. You've given him something, Keanu added. Not just this notebook, but a story, a real one. That's more than most kids ever get. Landon turned toward him. And you? Why are you really here? Keanu looked down at the notebook in his hands. Because I know what it's like to grow up with silence, with empty spaces where a father should have been. If someone had left me something like this, I might have spent fewer years angry at ghosts. Landon's eyes softened. So this is about your father, too. Keanu nodded. It's about finishing something that didn't get finished in my life, and making sure it does in his. As the moon rose higher, Keanu stood to leave. Landon struggled to rise, but Keanu motioned for him to stay seated. He placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You rest, Keanu said. I'll be back tomorrow. Landon looked up. One last thing. Keanu leaned in. Landon reached for a folded piece of paper on the desk. It was yellowed at the edges, like it had been carried for years. This is the first letter I ever wrote him, Landon said. Didn't have an address. Didn't know if I'd ever send it, but I read it to myself every birthday, his, I mean. Keanu took the letter, carefully slipping it inside the notebook. Hell have it, he said. Landon gave a faint nod. Then I can sleep. Keanu walked to the door, then paused. You did more than you think, Landon. Landon's voice came soft from behind. So did you. As Keanu stepped out into the quiet hallway, the desert wind stirred outside the windows. He looked down at the notebook in his hands, feeling the weight of every word written inside. Not just ink, not just memory. A father's final offering to a son who had never known his voice. He walked past the nurse's station, giving a small nod to Elaine, then stepped outside. The stars had emerged. Clear, endless, steady. Keanu looked up for a moment. Then he whispered into the sky. I promise. It wasn't just about delivering a notebook. It wasn't even about keeping Landon's memory alive. It was about showing Eli that the man who vanished didn't do so because he didn't care. He vanished because he was scared. But he returned, through pages and truth and one quiet conversation that rewrote everything. Keanu held the notebook closer and walked slowly to his car. And in that silence, filled with dust and stars and a name the world had forgotten, a promise was sealed. Not out of duty, but out of love. Keanu stood at the doorstep of a modest single-story home just outside Santa Fe. The lawn was well kept, the wind chimes hanging on the porch silent in the still air. The sun hung low, casting warm light across the small yard. In his hands, Keanu held a sealed envelope and a heart heavy with everything that had passed in the last 48 hours. Grace opened the door slowly, as if she'd been expecting this moment for longer than she cared to admit. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," Keanu replied. "Do you have a minute?" She nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled of cinnamon and clean linen. A small bookshelf in the corner was filled with children's novels, medical guides, and a few framed photos of Eli through the years. There was one of him at 5 with a Halloween mask, another of him holding a school trophy. None of them had a second adult in the frame. Grace offered tea, but Keanu declined. They sat at the small kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the blinds in long stripes across the wood. "I came to talk about Eli," Keanu said gently. Grace folded her hands. "I thought you might." Keanu pulled out the envelope and set it on the table. "Landon's in a rehab center. He's been there 6 months. He's very sick. Liver failure." Grace's eyes flickered with emotion, but her face stayed composed. "I wondered," she said after a long pause. "I used to look him up. Nothing ever came back." "Hate? Who was it?" "Oh, stopped thinking about you," Keanu said. "Or about Eli." Grace blinked hard. "Did he know about the pregnancy?" "He did," Keanu nodded. "He told me he was ashamed, that he didn't think he could be a father while he was broken." Grace closed her eyes. "I always wondered if I did the right thing, not pushing him to be involved." "You protected Eli," Keanu said softly. "That matters." She opened her eyes again. "So why now?" "Because Landon asked me for something before it's too late." Grace nodded slowly. "To tell Eli?" Keanu looked down, then back at her. "To not let him forget who he tried to be." Grace didn't speak for a long while. Then she said, "I always suspected, the way Eli walks, his quietness, his questions. He's more like Landon than he knows." Keanu asked, "Would it be okay if I talked to him? Just met him properly?" Grace studied his face. Then she smiled. "He'd like that." They arranged to meet the next afternoon at a local park near Grace's neighborhood. It was a quiet space with benches beneath cottonwood trees and a small playground that sat mostly unused during the week. Grace brought a picnic blanket and snacks. Eli carried a backpack and a curious look on his face. Keanu waited on a bench near the edge of the field. He stood as they approached. "Hi, Eli," he said. Eli gave a small wave. "Hi." Grace gestured to the bench. "I'll be nearby," she said, and walked toward a shaded spot with a book. Eli climbed up on the bench next to Keanu and unzipped his backpack. "I brought something," he said. Keanu smiled. "Can I see?" Eli pulled out a folded piece of drawing paper. On it was a pencil sketch of a motorcycle, detailed and shaded with care. The design was clearly inspired by real models, but the frame was unique. Something a child might imagine after watching documentaries or flipping through old magazines. "I'm going to build one someday," Eli said proudly. Keanu studied the drawing. "You know," he said, "you'd be surprised who wanted the same thing." Eli looked up. "You?" "Someone I knew, a long time ago. He used to sketch bikes too." Eli grinned. "Maybe I got it from him." Keanu nodded. "Maybe you did." They sat for a moment in comfortable silence. Eli pointed to a part of the engine in the sketch. "I don't know what this piece does, but I liked how it looked." "Sometimes that's enough," Keanu said. "Design first, function comes later." Eli laughed. Then he asked, "Are you the one sending me the books?" Keanu paused, then nodded, "Yes." "Wait." "Because I wanted you to know that someone believed in you." Eli looked down. I thought maybe it was a family friend, or someone who used to know my mom. Keanu hesitated, then said, "It was someone who knew your dad." Eli's head tilted. "My real dad?" Keanu met his eyes. "Yeah." Eli didn't ask more. He just nodded, absorbing it the way a child does when the truth sounds like it was always supposed to arrive. They continued talking about motorcycles, about books, about music. Eli asked if Keanu played piano. Keanu said yes. Eli told him about his favorite song to practice, something slow with lots of pedal. As the sun shifted and Grace called gently from the field, Eli packed up his sketch and zipped his bag. "I liked talking to you," he said. "I liked it too," Keanu replied. "Want to meet here again sometime?" Eli smiled. "Yeah. Can I bring another drawing?" "I'd like that." Keanu stayed behind after Grace and Eli left the park. He sat on the bench, the memory of the conversation looping through his mind. The boy's presence had a grounding effect. His curiosity was sharp but never rushed. His laughter came in short bursts, genuine and quick to recover, and the way he talked about building something with his hands. It reminded Keanu of a time when the future still felt like something you could design with nothing but a pencil and hope. Grace returned a few minutes later. She sat beside him, quiet at first. "He told me you were kind," she said. "He doesn't say that about everyone." Keanu nodded. "He's easy to be kind to." Grace looked at him. Did Landon know he liked machines? That he liked to take things apart? "He said once that Eli kicked in rhythm when he spoke to him," Keanu said. "I think he knew more than he let himself believe." She looked down at her hands. "Do I tell him everything?" Keanu considered. "When he's ready, but don't wait too long. The truth doesn't get easier with time, it just gets heavier." Grace exhaled. "That's what I was afraid of." "You've done everything right," Keanu said. "And now, you're not alone in it." Grace smiled faintly. "And what are you in it?" Keanu looked toward the horizon. "Just someone who owed a man more than a thank you, and who sees something worth protecting." She stood, brushing off her jeans. "You know, Eli's always asked about building something real. I think this is the start." Keanu stood too. "Then let's build it right." She nodded. "See you soon?" "Yeah," Keanu said. "You will." As she walked back toward her car, Keanu took out the notebook Landon had given him. He didn't open it. He didn't need to, not yet. He looked back toward the place where Eli had sat, talking about engines and balance and dreams. And he realized that for all the mistakes, all the silence, and all the years lost, something pure had made it through. Not through perfection, but through persistence. And in that moment, Keanu knew he would carry this promise to the end. Because some things, like a father's wish and a boy's spark, were never meant to fade. Keanu sat quietly in his home office, the soft hum of the evening wind outside the window. Sophia sat beside him, scrolling through drafts on her laptop, her fingers still, her expression focused. A second post was ready. Keanu had written the core of it by hand, and Sophia had cleaned it up just enough to keep its rawness intact. They didn't want it to sound polished. They wanted it to sound real. This one wasn't just about the stuntman who once saved Keanu's life. It was about what had come after. A boy who drew motorcycles with detail beyond his years, a father who disappeared under the weight of addiction and regret, and a promise made in a rehab center between two men, one fading and one carrying forward what might have been. They posted it through the Foundation's official channel, the same one that had shared the earlier anonymous story about a man who had once saved another and then vanished. This time, the message was longer, more emotional. There's a boy who draws motorcycles he's never ridden. He doesn't know why he loves engines or blueprints or gearboxes, but someone who once loved him loved those things too. That someone is gone now, but before he left behind words, pages, a history, not of glory, but of growth. A past he couldn't rewrite, but a future he hoped someone else would finish. Then came the prompt. Have you ever carried someone else's dream forward? Tell us how they inspired you. They posted it in the early evening. By midnight, there were over 10,000 shares. By the next morning, nearly 50,000. The stories poured in like a rising tide. Comments from strangers across the country and from as far as Brazil, France, Japan, and South Africa. No names, no fame. Just stories. It wasn't about celebrity. It was about lineage. Not by blood, but by spirit. One of the first stories came from a woman in rural Michigan. She wrote, "My father was a carpenter. He built cabinets with more love than most people write poems. He died before I turned 16. But I still use his hammer, still smell sawdust and think of him. My daughter built her first bookshelf last year. That's his dream, still breathing." Another post read, "I was adopted at age 4. My birth mother left behind a box of letters. I read them all at 23. She had always wanted to be a singer. I took voice lessons for her. And when I sang on stage for the first time, it felt like she was finally there." A man from New York shared, "My older brother used to sketch airplanes in his notebooks. He didn't live long enough to fly one. So I joined the Air Force for both of us. Every time I'm in the cockpit, I feel like I'm carrying him with me." There were stories of sons learning recipes from their mothers' notebooks, of daughters wearing the same dance shoes their grandmothers saved in a closet, of teachers who never had children of their own but planted dreams in other people's. A retired firefighter wrote, "My partner saved 3 kids from a burning apartment before the roof collapsed. He didn't make it out. His wife asked me to speak at his funeral. I promised I'd train every rookie like he trained me. 17 years later, I still say his name at every drill." Sophia sat with Keanu as they read story after story. "This is different," she whispered. "This isn't just viral. This is sacred." Keanu didn't speak at first. He only nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of the photo of Eli that sat beside the keyboard. Then he said, "It's the proof that love doesn't end when someone disappears. It just changes form." On the 3rd day after the post went live, something happened that neither Keanu nor Sophia expected. Among the thousands of comments, one name began to surface: Landon Shaw. At first it was subtle. A user commented, "Sounds a lot like this guy I used to know. Landon Shaw. If it is him, he deserves to be remembered." Then another, "He saved my cousin's life during a stunt rehearsal in Nevada. Never asked for thanks, just walked away." And then came a longer post that caught Sophia's attention immediately. "I knew Landon Shaw. We trained together at a facility in Albuquerque years ago. He was better than people gave him credit for. We lost touch after he moved south, but I never forgot him. He always talked about someone he hoped to make proud one day. A son, I think. If he's reading this, your dad was brave, even when he didn't feel like it." Sophia looked at Keanu. "They're remembering him." Keanu sat back, stunned. "After all this time, he's not just a name in my journal anymore." "Never was," Sophia said, "but now the world knows it too." Another comment followed, just 3 lines long. "My father wrote letters he never sent. I found them after he passed. They told me who he tried to be. I forgave him for everything." Keanu looked out the window. He thought of the notebook still in his possession, the one Landon had pressed into his hands like a sacred artifact, the one filled with pages Eli had yet to read. And for the first time, Keanu didn't see the boy as a symbol of loss or of what had been missed. He saw him as a bridge between past and future, between failure and forgiveness, between a man who ran away and the child who didn't yet know he was loved. And through this post, that bridge now connected thousands. Fathers to sons, mentors to students, dreamers to the people they left their blueprints behind for. Keanu closed his laptop. He didn't need to read more that night. The story had done what it was meant to do. It had given back what silence once tried to steal. And in doing so, It had returned a name to the world, not with noise, but with honor. Landon Shaw, a stuntman, a father, a man who rode into danger, and a man whose son would ride forward with his name not as a shadow, but as a light. The call came late in the evening, just as the sun had disappeared behind the hills. Sophia answered first, then passed the phone silently to Keanu. He didn't need an explanation. He could already feel it in the quiet tension of the line. It was Elaine, the intake director at the rehab center. "His conditions worsened," she said. "It's happening faster now. The pain's manageable, but if you want to say goodbye, it should be soon." Keanu packed a small overnight bag and left that night. The facility was quieter than usual. Fewer footsteps, fewer voices. The kind of silence that settled gently, like a blanket being drawn over the final hours of a long, worn life. Landon's room was dim, lit only by a small lamp in the corner and the fading orange glow outside his window. He lay in the bed, thinner than before, skin pale and eyes closed, but his breathing was steady, peaceful. Keanu pulled a chair beside him and sat down slowly. He didn't speak right away. He just listened to the rhythm of the room. After a few minutes, Landon stirred, his eyes blinking open. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth when he saw Keanu. "Still here," he whispered. "Still here," Keanu replied softly. Landon exhaled, a long, slow breath. "Didn't think I'd get another visit. I told you I'd carry it to the end." Landon nodded, his voice thin but present. "It's close now. I can feel it, like the quiet before a stunt starts." "You nervous?" "A little," Landon said. "But not like before. There's no fall to brace for, just the landing." Keanu looked at him gently. "You're not alone for it." Landon reached slowly toward the nightstand, his hand shaking. Keanu stood and helped him open the drawer. Inside was a single leather riding glove, old, worn, with the stitching frayed near the thumb. He handed it to Keanu. "Used to wear that on every set," Landon said. "Every time I got on a bike." Keanu turned it over in his hands. "Give it to him," Landon whispered. "Tell him it kept me steady. Maybe it'll do the same for him." "I will," Keanu said. Landon closed his eyes again, his hand now resting beside Keanu's. And neither man spoke for a while. They didn't need to. The following hours were quiet. Landon drifted in and out of sleep. Nurses came and went, adjusting fluids, checking vitals, offering soft words of comfort. Elaine stepped in only once, gave Keanu a nod, then stepped back to let them have the room. Keanu stayed. He read pages from the notebook Landon had filled, pages he hadn't seen yet. Some were half-written letters. Some were lines of poetry, memory, regret. Others were simple observations from his days in recovery. One line read, "I don't know if being better means being whole again, but I do know it means facing who you used to be without flinching." Keanu copied that line onto a scrap of paper and placed it inside the glove. Landon woke once more near dawn. The room was still, and the sky outside had begun to shift from black to a soft gray hue. He turned his head slightly, looking at Keanu. "You think he'll ride someday?" he asked. "I do." "You think he'll remember me?" Keanu nodded. "He already does, even if he doesn't know it yet." Landon gave a weak smile. "That's enough." His breath hitched slightly, and Keanu reached for his hand. "I'm scared," Landon whispered. "I know," Keanu said, tightening his grip. "But you're not running this time." Landon's fingers curled slightly, holding on. "I wanted to be more," he said. "For him, you were more," Keanu replied. "You are." Landon's eyes closed again. "I wish I had time." "You gave him what mattered," Keanu said. "Your truth." Landon nodded faintly. His breaths grew shallower, further apart. Keanu held his hand and stayed beside him. When the final breath came, it was so gentle it barely stirred the air. There was no alarm, no noise, just the stillness of a man who had finally stopped running. Later that morning, Keanu walked out into the open light. The sun had fully risen, casting a soft golden glow across the hills. In his hand, he carried the glove. Inside it, the note. In his bag, the notebook filled with letters. There were no cameras, no press releases, no headlines. Just a promise kept. He drove in silence, stopping once at a gas station to get coffee and sit for a moment in the stillness. He thought about the journey. How a single note had led to a boy with questions, a man with no time, and a bridge between them that had changed more lives than either of them could have predicted. By the time he reached Grace's house, the afternoon sun had warmed the porch. She opened the door quietly, her face already soft with knowing. "He's gone," Keanu said. Grace nodded. "I felt it this morning. Eli asked if I was okay. I told him I would be." Keanu handed her the glove. "You don't want him to have this." Grace held it carefully, her thumb brushing over the leather. "I remember these. He wore them when he picked me up for our first date." "There's something inside," Keanu said. She found the folded paper, opened it, and read the line. "I don't know if being better means being whole again, but I do know it means facing who you used to be without flinching." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. "We really tried," she said. "He did," Keanu replied, "all the way to the end." She looked up. "Will you tell Eli?" "I will, but only when you're ready." She nodded. "Maybe soon." Keanu stepped down from the porch, then paused. "Do you think he'll ride someday?" Grace smiled. "He already rides, with his heart first." Keanu returned to his car, the notebook and glove resting on the passenger seat beside him. And as he drove away, he felt something different. Not the end of a journey, but the handing off of one. Because what Landon couldn't finish, Eli would carry forward. And Keanu, quietly, would be there for every mile. Keanu stood in his study, surrounded by open drawers, envelopes, and a handful of faded photographs. On the desk sat a wooden box he had kept for years, unused, with a soft felt lining and a brass clasp that still gleamed under the light. He had bought it once, thinking he'd use it to store keepsakes, but nothing ever felt quite right. Until now. He laid the leather glove down first, fingers curled slightly as though still remembering the grip of a throttle. It had once clung to the handlebars of a motorcycle barreling across dirt, across flames, across danger. Landon's glove. Eli's now. Next came the notebook. The cover still showed the indent where Landon's hand had rested too long, too often. Keanu placed it carefully inside, beside the glove, making sure it lay flat. He had found old stunt footage too, grainy clips from a few movie sets where Landon had worked. Most were stored in archives, but Sophia had tracked them down. Keanu clipped still images from one where Landon leapt from a moving horse to save another actor from being trampled. It wasn't the film that made the moment memorable, it was the unscripted instinct. He printed the photo and wrote one line beneath it. He didn't think twice. Beside the photo, he added a few production stills of Landon behind the scenes, sitting on an equipment box, lacing his boots, laughing with another stuntman. Keanu had circled one of those photos. Landon's smile in it was rare and wide, the kind that looked like it had come from deep inside. That smile was for Grace. That was the day she had brought sandwiches to set. It was also a folded letter, one Keanu had written himself. It wasn't signed, and it wasn't meant to be read now. But someday Keanu knew Eli would be old enough to understand what it meant when someone kept a promise not out of obligation, but love. Finally, Keanu added a small pendant, not gold, not expensive, just a symbol, a small metal piece shaped like a flame. Landon had worn it on a leather string around his wrist. Keanu had taken it after the nurses removed it for comfort. It felt right here, tucked in the corner of the box. When it was done, Keanu closed the lid and ran his hand across the top. It wasn't just a box. It was a bridge between the boy and the man he never got to meet. Eli was sitting in the backyard when Keanu arrived. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the lawn, and a cool breeze stirred the air. Grace met Keanu at the door and walked him through the house quietly, giving a small nod as they reached the sliding glass door. "He's been sketching again," she said. "Every day since the park." Keanu smiled faintly. "He's building something, whether he knows it or not." Grace touched his arm gently and stepped back. Keanu walked out to the yard, the wooden box held carefully in both hands. Eli looked up from his sketch pad, blinking against the sun. "Hey," Keanu said. "Hey," Eli answered. "You came back." "I promised I would." Eli nodded and set his pencil down. "You brought something?" Keanu sat on the grass across from him and placed the box between them. "Yeah, it's for you, from someone who never stopped thinking about you." Eli tilted his head, curious. "Can I open it?" "Please do." Eli unclasped the brass latch and slowly lifted the lid. His eyes landed first on the glove. He reached in and held it up by the wrist, letting it dangle in the breeze. "It's old," he said. "It's been through a lot," Keanu replied. Then he saw the photo. "Is this him?" Keanu nodded. "That's your dad, Landon." Eli studied the image. "He looks like me." "He had the same stillness you do," Keanu said, "like he was always listening, even when he wasn't saying anything." Eli smiled at that. Then he found the notebook. He opened it carefully, running his fingers over the first page. The writing was uneven, a little messy, but alive. "Who wrote these?" "All of them," Keanu said. "For you." Eli didn't say anything. He turned another page, then another. His voice came quiet. "Was he brave?" Keanu didn't rush the answer. He looked into the boy's eyes and said, "Braver than most people ever knew." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Eli kept turning pages, reading lines aloud occasionally, whispering others just to himself. Keanu didn't interrupt. He let the moment be Eli's. After a while, Eli reached for the small flame pendant. "What's this?" "Hello Car wore it every day," Keanu said. He said it reminded him that fire can destroy or it can light the way. Eli nodded slowly. Then he took the string and looped it around his wrist, pulling the knot snug. "Hell didn't finish the last letter," Eli said. "It stops in the middle of a sentence." "I think he ran out of time," Keanu said softly. Eli closed the notebook gently. "Then maybe I'll finish it." Keanu looked at him. "What would you write?" Eli thought for a moment, then said, "That I'll be okay." "That? I'm glad he tried." Keanu felt his throat tighten. He reached over and placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. That's more than he ever thought he'd get to hear. They sat together until the light began to fade. When it was time to leave, Eli asked if he could keep the box outside, in the shed where he worked on his sketches. Keanu smiled. "It belongs wherever you want it to." Grace stepped onto the porch as they came in. She looked at Eli, then at Keanu, her eyes shining with something wordless. Later that night, as Keanu drove home, he thought about the glove, the notebook, the pendant. But mostly he thought about Eli's voice when he said, "I'll be okay." Because that, more than anything, was the legacy Landon had left behind. Not a perfect life, not a heroic ending, but a boy who understood that broken people can still build beautiful things. It started with a promise and an old bike frame. Keanu had called in a favor from a longtime friend named Dennis, a retired stunt mechanic who once built motorcycles for movies that no longer played in theaters but still lived on in the minds of the people who made them. Dennis had space, tools, and, more importantly, the patience to let two beginners turn grease and steel into memory. That Saturday, Keanu arrived at Grace's house just after 7 in the morning. The sun was still stretching over the rooftops, and the neighborhood was barely awake. Eli was already on the porch, backpack in hand, wearing the same flame pendant he hadn't taken off since Keanu gave it to him. "You sure you're ready for this?" Keanu asked with a grin. Eli didn't hesitate. "I've been ready." They drove out to Dennis's garage. Small, cluttered with tools that looked older than Eli but sharper than ever. The stripped-down motorcycle frame sat in the middle of the concrete floor, balanced on a pair of stands. Dennis greeted them with a nod. "She's ugly," he said, "but she's honest, like most good things." He handed Eli a wrench. "You want her to run, you're gonna have to earn it." Eli gripped the wrench tight. "Where do we start?" Keanu looked at the frame, then at the boy beside him. "The bones," he said. The first bolt turned with a squeak, and the build began. Every Saturday for the next 12 weeks, they worked. Keanu picked Eli up early, always bringing a thermos of hot chocolate for him and coffee for Dennis. The first hour was spent organizing tools and reviewing diagrams. The next 6 passed in a blur of sanding, bolting, aligning, and recalibrating. Dennis taught the mechanical details. Keanu taught something else: patience, rhythm, the value of effort without perfection. But the most powerful lessons came from Landon himself. Keanu had made copies of Landon's notebook pages, the ones filled with scribbled thoughts that had never been meant for anyone's eyes but his own. He brought one each week and read it aloud when Eli hit a wall, when a chain slipped or a bolt refused to budge or the engine wouldn't align. On the third Saturday, Eli grew frustrated trying to tighten the rear axle. Keanu pulled a folded note from his pocket and read, "When it won't fit, step back, breathe. Maybe it's not the part, maybe it's your grip." Eli loosened his grip, tried again. The axle clicked into place. Another weekend, they couldn't get the brakes to mount. Keanu handed Eli a new page. Things take time. Some of the best rides begin with the longest waits. Eli smiled, then got back under the frame. The garage became more than a workspace. It became a classroom, a sanctuary, a connection point between a boy and the man he'd never meet. Grace stopped by sometimes, watching from the doorway. She never interrupted. She didn't need to. She saw what was happening. Not just a bike being built, a bond being built, one turn at a time. By the 10th week, the motorcycle was finally starting to look like something that could move. The engine was mounted, the exhaust system was balanced, the frame had been smoothed and polished. The only thing missing was the finish, the paint, the decals, the personal touches. Liari had a design in mind. He showed Keanu a sketch he'd been working on for weeks. It wasn't flashy, just clean lines, a simple blue and silver color scheme, and one symbol on the side of the tank, a flame, just like the pendant on his wrist. Keanu smiled. He would have loved that. Eli looked up. "He wore it every day? Every set, every stunt, every ride," Keanu said, "even when he felt like giving up." Eli thought for a moment. "I don't want this to be perfect. I just want it to be mine." Keanu nodded. "Then, that's exactly what it'll be." On the 12th Saturday, they rolled the bike out into the sunlight. The engine hadn't been fired yet. That moment would come later, but just seeing it there, standing tall, balanced, solid, made something shift in Eli's chest. He looked at Keanu. Did he ever ride something like this? He rode things a lot wilder than this, Keanu laughed. But this would have been his favorite. Eli ran his hand across the seat. "I think I'm ready to try it." "Soon," Keanu said. "We'll take it slow. One gear at a time." Grace stood at the back of the garage, watching the two of them together. Keanu caught her eye. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. Later that night, as Eli packed up his sketch pad and gloves, he handed Keanu a new page. It read, "To the man who didn't just show up, but stayed. Thank you for teaching me how to build." Keanu folded the page and tucked it into his coat. Because some things are never finished. They're just passed on. The invitation had been simple, written in white font on navy cardstock and mailed out with no fanfare. An evening of stories dedicated to those who gave more than they ever took. Hosted by the Shaw Legacy Fund, a branch of the Literacy Foundation. There was no celebrity spotlight, no red carpet, no paparazzi. Just folding chairs in a softly lit room with white walls and a handmade banner hung above the modest stage. It read, "For the ones who saved us," and then disappeared. Sophia had helped organize it. Dennis donated the audio equipment. Grace baked cookies herself. Keanu didn't want speeches that preached or performances that entertained. He wanted a gathering that felt like a circle around a campfire, honest, intimate, healing. As the guests trickled in, there was a quiet reverence to how they took their seats. Most didn't know the name Landon Shaw, but they knew someone like him. Someone who had left a mark but vanished before they could be thanked. The room filled with educators, stunt coordinators, foundation donors, and people who'd seen the recent posts online and were drawn by the words. Eli sat in the front row, his small sketchbook tucked in his lap, hands folded neatly. Keanu waited behind the curtain. He looked down once more at the note in his hand, the last line Landon had written in his journal before he passed. "We don't all get to be fathers, but if we try hard enough, maybe we get to be remembered." He stepped onto the stage, flame pendant around his neck, and looked out at the crowd. "Thank you for being here," he said. "Tonight isn't about grief. It's about gratitude, and how sometimes the people who changed us the most never heard us say it." He paused, then added, "Until now." Keanu began with the truth. Not polished, not heroic, just true. "Landon Shaw wasn't famous," he said. "You won't find a statue of him or a building with his name. He was a stuntman. He worked behind the camera. He kept people safe while they made something bigger than themselves." The audience listened in silence as Keanu told the story of the day Landon pulled him from a horse's path on a windy set in New Mexico. How he vanished after the shoot. How rumors followed. Rehab, debt, burnout. But no one looked for the man behind the silence. "No one but one," Keanu said, glancing at Eli. "A boy who grew up wondering where he got his steadiness from." He spoke of Grace, of the note she handed him outside a literacy event, of the photo, of the quiet resemblance that started it all. "Sometimes a question walks into your life and refuses to leave," he said. "For me, that question was, what if I was meant to find him, so he could be found by someone else?" He didn't tell the room all the painful details, but he told them enough. That Landon got clean, that Landon wrote, that he left behind something better than regret. "Hell didn't get a second act," Keanu said, "but he did get a second chance. He asked me for one thing: don't let his son forget who he tried to be." Keanu stepped aside as a slideshow played. Silent images rolled across the screen. Photos of Landon in midair, of him laughing with crew members, of the glove Eli now kept on his shelf. A clip showed him landing on pavement and popping up with a grin, brushing gravel from his jeans. The final photo lingered longer. Landon holding a script, smiling at someone off camera. You could almost see the fire still alive in his chest. Keanu returned to the microphone. He was brave, not because he never fell, but because he kept getting up, even when no one was watching. Then he gestured to Eli. "There's someone else who wants to say a few words." Eli stood up and walked to the microphone without looking back. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, and his sneakers still had motor oil stains on them from the garage, but he stood tall, like someone who had earned the right to be there. "I didn't get much time," he said, his voice clear. "Not the kind of time other kids get with their dads." He glanced down at the sketchbook in his hand, then closed it and set it aside. "But I got something else," he said. "I got the truth." He looked around the room. "I got the truth that my dad didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he thought he wasn't enough. And that truth hurts, but it also helps, because now I get to tell a different story." He held up his wrist, showing the flame pendant. "I gave this to someone who gave it to me. It reminds me that even small fires can stay lit if you protect them." There wasn't a sound in the room. Then Eli said one last thing. "I used to think I'd never get to know him, but now I do. Through pages, through pictures, through the people he helped, through the motorcycle we built in his honor." He paused, looking toward Keanu, and through the person who'd never let the story end in silence. He stepped down, returning to his seat. Grace took his hand and squeezed it gently. After the event, guests walked quietly past the display table, where Landon's glove rested in a glass box. Next to it was his flame pendant, a printed page from his journal, and a plaque that read, "In honor of Landon Shaw. A father, a friend, a flame that never went out." Keanu stood in the back as people passed, some pausing to leave small notes in a memory jar. A few whispered, "Thank you." One man in a stunt coordinator's jacket said, "I wish we'd known what he was carrying." Later that night, as the chairs were folded and the lights dimmed, Keanu stood at the banner one last time. "For the ones who saved us," and then disappeared. He pinned a card underneath the corner. The handwriting was Eli's. It read, "I found him, and he found me too." The event had ended, but the impact stayed. The room was mostly empty now. A few staff folded chairs quietly. Someone unplugged the projector. The last batch of cookies was wrapped in foil and placed into a storage container. Grace and Eli were already on their way home, but not before Eli had hugged Keanu tightly and whispered, "Thank you for helping me find him." Keanu stayed behind, standing near the center of the room, his eyes on the stage. The banner still hung overhead, just slightly tilted to one side now. "For the ones who saved us," and then disappeared. He thought about that phrase, how many people it applied to, not just Landon, but the teachers who'd stayed late for no pay, the caretakers who made others whole while carrying grief of their own, the fathers and mothers who left not because they didn't care, but because the world never gave them the tools to stay. And he thought about what Eli had said, "I didn't get much time, but I got the truth." That line would stay with him forever. Because truth, when delivered with compassion, can carry more weight than decades of absence. It can heal. It can honor. Continue. As he walked slowly through the now quiet room, Keanu passed the display table one more time. He paused in front of the glove. One last time, he read the plaque beneath it. A father, a friend, a flame that never went out. He placed a folded piece of paper on the table beside the glass. On it were just 4 words. He finished the ride. The next morning, Keanu returned to the garage, where the motorcycle still sat under a protective tarp. He pulled it back slowly, revealing the blue and silver frame, the polished handlebars, the flame emblem shining quietly beneath the morning light. He didn't start the bike. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat beside it on the workbench and took out Eli's notebook. The last page was dated the previous week. On it was a sketch of a father and son, one figure slightly transparent, like a memory, the other standing beside a completed motorcycle, flame pendant hanging from his neck. Below the drawing was one sentence in neat handwriting: "What we build outlives what we lose." Keanu closed the notebook slowly. So much of this journey had begun with a note handed to him in a crowd, a few folded words that had changed the course of multiple lives. And now, that circle had closed. Grace had found peace. Eli had found identity. Landon had found a kind of immortality, not through fame, but through being remembered, truthfully, and with love. And Keanu? He had found something too, that even if we're not fathers by blood, we can still be protectors, guides, carriers of stories that deserve to be known. He stood, placed the notebook back in its box, and walked to the garage door. As he opened it, sunlight flooded the space, lighting up the metal and tools and paper drawings that hung along the wall. And for a moment, everything felt whole, not fixed, but full, like the past, present, and future were all sharing the same room. That afternoon, the Foundation posted one final message from the story. It read, "Some names fade, others echo. This one was never famous, but it saved a life, then shaped another. This is for the fathers who left too soon, and the ones who found their way back, even if only in words. For the sons who forgive, and the friends who carry the truth forward. We ask you now, have you ever learned the truth about someone too late, but still in time to forgive them? Tell us your story in the comments below. And one more. What story should we tell next with Keanu Reeves? Drop your ideas below. We're always listening. Within hours, the post had thousands of replies. A woman shared about her father who wrote her letters from prison but died before she ever saw him again. A man wrote about his uncle who raised him quietly but never asked to be called dad. A teenager wrote, "I used to be ashamed of who my father was, but now I'm proud of who he tried to become." Keanu read every word. That night, as he stood on his balcony, he thought again about the power of what they'd just lived through. It wasn't a rescue story. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. It was flawed. And because of that, it was unforgettable. Somewhere in that great messy tangle of truth and grief and repair, a boy had found his name. A man had kept his word. And a stranger had become something more than a bystander. He had become a guardian of legacy. As the stars blinked overhead, Keanu whispered something into the wind. For all the ones who vanished, someone still remembers. And as the screen faded to black, a final line appeared. Coming soon. She raised Keanu, but someone else raised her. And her past is even more mysterious.